One day, when I was driving home from my college classes on Route 9, as I always do, I had to make a red light stop that I never made before. It was on Georgetown Boulevard by Ebenezer's, and I saw a homeless man waiting for the bus there by the bus stop. Now, as I was driving by, I saw he was trying to lay down, but something was blocking him. So I came back the next day to see these horrendous green handlebars on this small bench, and this building practice is called hostile architecture, and is exactly why I'll be persuading you today on why the US needs to ban hostile architecture. The US needs to follow through with this due to it going past protecting structural integrity, affecting everyone, including the people it's not aimed at, and not solving homelessness. I ask for you to listen today, as it'll make you smarter on an issue that is just plaguing New Jersey, and I'm credible enough to talk about this due to my firsthand experience with it, and also using sources that are affected by it in areas that are most affected by it. The first citation that I use is from Nolan Hick's New York Post article, and I chose Nolan due to him being a 5-year veteran of the company, and I also use him for the 5 years that he spent there. The homeless crisis in New York City has been his forte. He states here that hostile architecture and other anti-homeless acts have only harmed the New York City population, with the homeless population rising to 18% as of this year, making it so $171 million in federal funds have gone down the drain. In this persuasive speech, I'll be going over the problems and causes of hostile architecture. And now that you know I want to persuade you today about banning hurtful hostile architecture in the US, let's first start with how it affects buildings and the people. One of the earliest forms of hostile architecture can be seen in 19th century Great Britain with the invention of the urine deflector. And as this architectural innovation is named, its job was to deflect urine. This was cheap, effective, and it worked. This protected structural integrity, but over many years, architects decided that they wanted to go past protecting structural integrity and look no forward than the modern day example of the St. Green Plaza located in New York City. Now, as I was looking at this photo, I was trying to figure out what was wrong with it. For being labeled a public space, it's lacking. There are no public commodities such as sitting areas, drinking fountains, or even a public restroom. And for being labeled public, I've never seen something more privatized in my entire life. The other issue is that it affects everyone, including the people it's not aimed at. And look no further than the SEPTA benches. Now, the SEPTA benches are located in Pennsylvania's subway terminals, and they have in the above sections these leaning benches. Yes, you heard that right, a leaning bench. You cannot fully sit down on these benches. And they have inside the terminals these ones made out of sheet metal, which can only fit 2 to 3 people at once and have these rivets in them that jab and stab you, so you can only sit on them for a limited amount of time. This is encouraged to keep homeless people from sleeping off of these benches. And my research on this was done by Caracello, who's a part of the Global Suburbanism Project, as a researcher for these benches, and she states that the elements that make these spaces hostile for targeted populations, and when she says targeted populations, she means the homeless people, also make them hostile for us, the general public. Now that I've listed the specific problems of hostile architecture, what exactly are the causes of it? Well, going back to the urine deflectors, the first cause of it is protecting structural integrity. But how big of a problem was this back then? For my research on this, I used Finn Byron's My London article, and I chose him because he grew up and still lives in Ealing, London, where these were first built and are still seen today. He states here that these alleyways were corroded in feces and urine for so long, whether it be acts of protest or just drunk people, that they began corroding and even destroying these buildings made out of brick. And this leads into my next citation, which is from Chairman of Ludicor. And if you don't know what a Ludicor is, it is the largest producer of aluminum used for architectural purposes in the world, Chairman Ashok Kumar Bahaya, where he states that hostile architecture is meant to discourage people, but goes after 2 specific groups: people that commit specific behaviors, or people that are a part of certain groups of people, which can be labeled as stereotypical or even racist to some. And this leads to my next cause, which is presentation. Presentation is everything. When you're told to go get a job, you're told to dress nicely and act the part. And that's the same with architecture. For my research to aid this, I've used Bae-Yin Kung's Architecture in the City article, which can be found at the OCC library, where she states that architecture is so important to us that it's always on our cultural menu. We watch TV shows about it. We have whole TV stations dedicated to it. A lot of us are always looking on our phone to look for a house to live. And we're not looking at the bad houses, we're looking at a house that meets our needs, and most of all, is presentable. Now, I chose Bae's article due to her working for the Koreana, which is the largest Korean to English translated news source in the world, but also because if they're talking about this in a place that some of us may never have the chance to visit, it shows how important architecture is. To aid this, I provided two photos of two banks. One is the Emigrant Savings Bank, located in Philadelphia, and the other one is a bank that's also located in Philadelphia. The Emigrant Savings Bank looks like it has been updated since about the 70s and 80s, while the one in Philadelphia looks like it came straight out of ancient Greece during its prime time. Based on presentation alone, you can't deny that this one in Philadelphia looks better than this one. While the causes of hostile architecture are understandable, I believe there are better solutions than redesigning public spaces. The following changes include putting money towards fighting poverty. Now, what do I mean when I say this? Instead of putting spikes under a bypass or spikes on a bench, why don't we utilize the government budget towards something more available architecture-wise? And while we're at it, why don't we utilize this budget towards more affordable jobs, more affordable programs to get better jobs, apprenticeships, or even affordable housing if we're going to go that far. And while we're at it, the other solution is architecture that helps the homeless temporarily. Now, to show how big of a problem hostile architecture is, at least in the city, former New York City Comptroller Scott M. Stringer, and if you don't know what a comptroller is, it's someone that inspects buildings on a federal or state government level, states that out of the 333 properties he's had to inspect yearly for his time as a comptroller, 193 were cited for violations that were labeled as hostile architecture. And if it's this big in the city, and I'm starting to see it in states like New Jersey, it just shows that this problem is going to spread across America. Now that I've listed my solutions, what does the opposition feel? The main argument for being for hostile architecture is that it lowers crime rate and vandalism. And frankly, this is just false. New York University professor and architectural historian John Ritter states that these barriers and walls that we build around public life and public spaces keeps out the diversity of people and uses it to compromise urban life. And the more and more you compromise, the more pressure is going to build up. And these people are going to revolt against taking our basic needs that includes public comfortability. The other opposition is that it moves the homeless into homeless shelters. From the quote I've used before, at least in the cities, homeless shelters aren't doing that good of a job of keeping people off the streets. So, Chairman Bahia lists something in his LinkedIn article called compassionate urban designing, which is the building process of meeting basic people's needs, such as public restrooms that meet just about anyone, public drinking fountains that have drinkable water, and comfortable seating areas. Now that I've listed some commonly opposed questions, let's review and conclude on this persuasive speech. I've gone over how hostile architecture that hurts the public is the problem, federal, state, and civilian-ran buildings are the causes of this, some simple solutions, and some commonly opposed questions. But to truly conclude, I just want to say that one day you could be homeless, specifically that homeless man that I saw waiting for the bus. And I would hate, after a long day of just you getting by, whether you put yourself in that situation or not, the only thing that could give you comfortability for a couple seconds is doused in hate, spikes, and everything that goes against you for just getting by. Okay.